In this video, I'm going to talk about a new bait, new jig head that I've just started using, and a new soft plastic that we just poured from Do It Molds. This is the 2-inch flapjack soft plastic and a 1/8 ounce teardrop jig with the wire keeper. I discovered that this works for panfish, and that's what it was made for, was crappie and different types of panfish. But I've used this cold water. We're talking probably one of the coldest water videos I've done, 34, 35 degree surface temps, and I'm catching big smallmouth that are extremely lethargic and very finicky, where I'm using my live scope Panoptics from Garmin. I'm just going over the fish and dropping this bait on them and just kind of working those fish, kind of like almost like ice fishing on the boat. And this is, I was pleasantly surprised on how effective this bait is, because those fish will not eat a swim bait. You could catch them on a hair jig, but they weren't really relating to something where you could throw a hair jig. So hair jig is a very time-consuming bait. You're more efficient by using your electronics, seeing a fish, dropping a bait precisely on that fish. And this bait was just incredible the day that I used it, the first time I ever used it. So I'm going to show you this video, and I'm going to kind of go through, some of the fish catches with a voiceover of kind of what was going on that day, the first day that I used the Do It Molds teardrop with the wire keeper and the 2-inch flapjack plastic.
Okay, so the water temperature this day was 34 to 35 degrees. All the lakes had ice on them, and this lake had some skim ice, but under these conditions the fish are very lethargic. So you can really kind of put a lot of the techniques away. I like this time of year because there's only a few baits that are going to catch them, or a few techniques. And this was the first day that I had used this new soft plastic from Do It, which is the 2-inch flapjack, something that was designed for crappie. I got it, we poured some of the baits, and I said, man, it's the right profile. Let me match it up with the jig, which was a teardrop jig with a wire keeper. So the jig head's kind of new to me. I do a lot of stuff with a freestyle jig wire keeper, round head jig wire keeper. This is a little bit different design in the head, and I just felt like it matched that bait perfectly when I tested it in the water before I went out fishing. And pretty much got on smallmouth right away. They weren't schooled up. This time of year, it's weird. Sometimes they can be schooled up, sometimes they can be really scattered. What we had was kind of cold weather, warm weather, cold weather, and that really scatters the fish. They don't feed as much also when the water is this cold. They do feed though, and what this video doesn't show is that these fish were puking up alewives. Pretty much every single fish had some kind of alewive that it was, remains of an alewive that it was puking up. But so they do eat, but they don't eat every day. And I find that when it's sunny this time of year, your success, or it's going to be a lot easier to get them to bite. And that's kind of typical for smallmouth anyway, but it's really important this time of year. The sun is important. What this video doesn't show is the fact that some of these fish I would work for several minutes. So the calmer it is, the easier it is to stay on top of a fish, because I'm literally dropping this bait on these fish and just working these fish, very methodical, watching my live scope Panoptics, seeing these fish, dropping a bait on them, and then just really just kind of keeping that bait above the fish, working that fish until he comes up and bites it. And they'll just come up real slow. Each fish is different. I love this type of fishing because your electronics kind of show the mood of the fish, and you have to adjust your presentation to the mood of each fish. Every single fish this day was totally different. You can see these fish are really fat. The thing that's really important about fishing this time of year is, you notice I'm letting these fish go right away. I'm not putting them in the live well. Super important to do that. I see a lot of guys that put them in the live well. Not good for him. That fish is inflated. He's been pulled out of deep water, and he needs to go back right away. If you're pulling them up pretty fast, they come up pretty fast. So it's really important to get those fish back down there right away You don't have to fizz them if you do that. You see how fast these fish come up. The whole key is take care of the resource. It's a fun time to fish, but don't put them in the live well. Catch them, take a quick picture, release them right away, and their air bladder will adjust. Never had a problem with a fish caught out of deep water this time of year if I let it go right away. Bad idea to put it in the live well. You can see these fish are fat, but they're also a little bloated from getting pulled up out of deep water. And you know, this is just an awesome technique because these fish don't want to chase. You know, they won't eat a swim bait. These fish would not eat a swim bait. They would eat a hair jig, but these fish are so scattered that I'm using my electronics to cover water and locate these fish. The majority of these fish this day were between 30 to 40 feet of water. You know, the whole key of finding the fish was being in an area where there was bait fish. This time of year, it is all about the bait. You know, everything moves deeper. There's more oxygen in deeper water, so fish are deeper, especially on this lake, than they are at any time of the year. In the summertime, they'll be confined to the thermocline, and you know, the thermocline definitely doesn't go as deep as the fish are right now. So the fish are in deeper water. They can be in more places, obviously. There's a lot more water for, you know, that fish to use. But the thing is, the key to find those fish is getting in areas where there's concentrations of bait. And that's what, you know, part of what I'm looking for is that presence of bait. It's not as much structure as it is bait. You get around bait, you'll see bait, you'll start catching perch, you'll start catching smallmouth, and those big, you know, smallmouth will be very close to those big perch as well, and even crappie and etc. Everything is kind of feeding on those alewives, and you know, that's the food source on this particular lake. That's what fuels the lake. And you know what this bait mimics is a small alewife. It's an injured alewife, and what you're basically doing is when you're putting that bait in front of that fish, you're kind of tempting that fish to take that small, injured, dying alewife. I believe a lot of this stuff naturally occurs this time of year. This time of year, you'll see seagulls working. There's a natural fish kill with bait, especially the further you get into the winter where the lakes don't freeze. You have a natural kill with the bait, and these fish are, because of that, they're lethargic and they won't chase. They don't have to chase when they can just move around and eat, you know, dying bait fish. When you have that phenomenon occur, the fish are harder and harder to catch, and that's where this finesse presentation really shines. I've used this freestyle technique with a few different baits. This is a bait that's definitely added to the arsenal. Just a phenomenal, tough conditions, cold water bait. That 2-inch Do It Molds flapjack rigged on the 1/8 ounce teardrop jig with wire keeper.